People always say death creeps in quietly, but that's a lie. Mine came loud, metallic, and brutal, wrapped in the screech of twisted metal and the taste of blood in my mouth. By the time I opened my eyes, it wasn't death I saw. It was him, the doctor, the man whose hands pulled me back from the cliff of nothingness, whose gaze pierced deeper than the pain burning in my chest. Snowflakes blurred the glass of the hospital window as I lay half-conscious, the machines tethering me to life. The storm outside was relentless, burying the mountain roads, cutting us off from the rest of the world. I should have felt trapped. Instead, for reasons I couldn't explain, I felt found. His name was Daniel Hayes, 32, head doctor of the tiny hospital that looked more like a cabin swallowed by snow than a place where lives were saved. He wasn't supposed to mean anything to me. He was just the man who stitched my wounds, the voice that told me I would live. But the way he looked at me, steady, pained, like there was more he wanted to say but couldn't. That was the beginning of everything. "Don't fall asleep," he said softly the first night. His fingers brushed against mine as he checked my foreline. That touch was clinical, professional. At least it should have been. But it stayed with me like a brand. "You fought too hard to give up now." I wanted to laugh at the irony. I hadn't fought. I'd given up the moment my car spun across black ice and slid toward the ravine. But maybe Daniel had fought for me, and maybe that was enough. Days passed. I learned the rhythm of the hospital. The hiss of radiators, the creak of snow settling on the roof, the distant coughs of other patients. But mostly I learned Daniel. His tired eyes that never quite revealed what haunted him. The way he avoided small talk yet always lingered just long enough to make me feel less alone. The hospital was full of people, yet he was the only one I noticed. I shouldn't have. Not here, not now. But loneliness has a way of making the heart reckless, and mine was starving. One night, when the storm howled so fiercely that even the walls seemed to tremble, I found him in the hallway. He wasn't wearing his white coat, just a gray sweater and jeans, and he looked less like a doctor and more like a man unraveling. His hands were in his pockets, his jaw tight. "You should be resting," he said when he saw me, his voice stern but soft around the edges. "Resting feels too much like dying," I replied, leaning against the wall for balance. "Besides, I wanted to thank you for saving me." Daniel's eyes flickered, and in them, I saw something raw. Guilt, fear, desire, maybe all three. "You don't owe me thanks," he murmured. "If anything, I owe you the truth." I frowned, confused, but before I could press him, a nurse called his name, pulling him back into the endless demands of duty. I was left standing there, heart hammering, more awake than I had been in weeks. The truth. What truth? The next days became a game of searching for pieces. A word left unsaid, a look that lingered too long. And then one morning, I found him in the supply room, his head in his hands, whispering something I wasn't meant to hear. "She deserves more than this, more than me." Except the way he said it, the tremor in his voice, it wasn't about a woman. It was about something larger, deeper. And that was when I began to suspect. The storm wouldn't let up. The hospital was locked in its own snowbound world, and I was trapped with a man who carried secrets like shadows on his back. But the strangest part was how alive I felt, how my chest burned not just from broken ribs but from the ache of wanting to know him, to break past whatever wall he had built. One night, he came into my room after midnight. His face was pale, his lips pressed into a thin line. "I need you to know something," Daniel whispered. "But you have to promise me. Promise me you won't hate me." Hate him? The thought was absurd. I was already too far gone, already falling for the way his hands trembled when they touched me, the way his eyes betrayed the softness he tried so hard to hide. "What is it?" I asked. He sat at the edge of my bed, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him. For a moment he said nothing. Then, his voice broke the silence, low and trembling. "There's a life inside you, a child. Ours." The world stopped. My breath caught. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, the cruel twist, the explanation that never came. But Daniel's face held only truth, devastating and tender all at once. Outside, the snow raged. Inside, my heart did the same. The silence stretched so long it became unbearable. His words hung in the air, heavier than the storm pressing against the glass. A child. Ours. The sentence didn't fit the world I knew, didn't fit the way life was supposed to work. Yet Daniel said it with a conviction that left no room for disbelief. "You're lying?" I whispered, though my voice cracked halfway, betraying the tremor in my chest. Daniel shook his head. His eyes glistened in the dim light, shadows dancing across the hard planes of his face. "I wish I were. God, I wish this was something I could take back. But it's the truth." A storm raged inside me, colliding with the storm outside. My ribs ached with every breath, but the deeper ache came from something I couldn't name. Fear, confusion, hope even when it made no sense. How my throat closed around the question. How could that even be possible? Daniel lowered his head, running a hand over his face as if the weight of the moment might crush him. "This hospital isn't like others. The small, yes, but it's tied to research most people never hear about. Experimental treatments, genetic studies. Years ago, I was part of a project. One that tested what the human body was capable of under extraordinary circumstances. And somehow that path led us here." Us. The word sliced through me. "Daniel, we barely know each other. I came in broken from a car crash, and now you're telling Muhat that I'm carrying a child that belongs to you." His silence was the only answer, but silence was enough. I should have screamed, should have thrown him out of my room, demanded explanations, called him insane. But instead, I clung to the fragile rhythm of his breathing, the quiet desperation in his eyes. Because beneath the impossible, there was a thread I couldn't ignore. He believed it. Every word. My voice was hoarse when I spoke again. "Why me?" Daniel looked at me then, really looked like I was both his salvation and his undoing. "Because you survived when you weren't supposed to. Because your body took something impossible and didn't reject it. And because, whether you know it or not, you're the only person I've ever wanted this with." Couldn't breathe. The machines beside my bed beeped steadily, a cruel reminder that my body still clung to life while my mind spun further into chaos. My eyes burned, and before I could stop them, tears slid down my face. Anger, fear, wonder, every emotion collided inside me like a car skidding on ice. "This is insane," I muttered, shaking my head. "You're insane." "Maybe I am," Daniel admitted. "But that doesn't change what's inside you." For the first time since the accident, I wanted to run. The hospital bed felt like a cage, the walls too close, the storm outside too loud. But there was nowhere to go. Nowhere except deeper into the truth Daniel had laid before me. "Why would you hide this?" My voice was sharp, slicing through the fragile air between us. "Why keep me in the dark if this child was mine?" Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked away, his shoulders rigid. "Because you'd hate me for it. Because the moment you knew, you'd see me not as the man who saved you, but as the one who stole your future." His words cut deeper than the wounds on my body. And maybe, just maybe, that was why I didn't push him away. Because if what he said was true, then my future was already rewritten, and no amount of anger could undo it. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, listening to the wind tear against the building, my mind replaying every word, every look, every tremor in his voice. The storm outside mirrored the one inside me, and both felt endless. By morning, I expected Daniel to avoid me, to retreat into his doctor's mask and pretend the night's confession hadn't happened. But he didn't. He came into my room with his usual clipboard, his usual steady steps. But when our eyes met, there was no pretense. Only raw honesty. "Eat something," he said, setting down a tray. His voice was firm, the way a doctor's should be, but his hands lingered just a second too long on the table. I pushed the tray away. "I can't eat. Not when my whole life's been turned upside down." Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line. He sat on the chair beside me, folding his hands in his lap like a man awaiting judgment. "Then talk to me. Scream at me. Do whatever you need. Just don't shut me out. His vulnerability was disarming. This man who had stitched my wounds, who held the weight of lives in his hands daily, sat there like a boy afraid of losing everything. And maybe that was when the truth hit me hardest. He wasn't just hiding a secret. He was breaking under it. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Instead, I whispered the question that had haunted me all night. Do you regret it? His eyes softened, and for the first time, he reached for my hand not as a doctor, but as something more. His fingers trembled against mine. Never. Not for a second. The world seemed to narrow then. The snow, the hospital, the fear, all of it fading into the warmth of his touch. And though my mind screamed at me to resist, my heart leaned closer. The following days blurred. The storm worsened, trapping us even more tightly in the mountains. Supplies ran thin, nurses whispered about shortages, and patients grew restless. Yet through it all, Daniel and I orbited each other, our secret binding us closer than we dared admit. At night, he sat with me, telling me fragments of his past, how he had grown up in the city, how he'd once dreamed of leaving medicine behind but could never abandon the calling to save lives, how loneliness had carved at him for years, leaving only walls no one dared climb, until me, and I, in turn, told him pieces of myself, my reckless mistakes, my fear of being ordinary, my craving for something that felt like belonging. We spoke like men standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing one wrong step would mean a fall, but still unwilling to step back. The hospital became our world. Every glance held weight. Every brush of fingers carried electricity. And though neither of us said it outright, love grew in the quiet spaces between words. But love wasn't enough to silence the doubt gnawing at me. Late at night, when Daniel finally left and I was alone, I would press my hand against my stomach, searching for proof, wondering if the impossible could truly be real, and wondering what it would mean for me, for him, for us. The breaking point came one morning when a patient crashed in the next room. Alarms blared, nurses rushed, and I caught a glimpse of Daniel through the doorway, his hands moving with precision, his face hard with focus. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. The man who carried life and death in his hands daily, who carried my secret in silence, who carried me. When it was over, when the patient was stabilized, Daniel stumbled into the hallway, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion. I couldn't stop myself. I went to him, despite the pain in my ribs, despite the questions still tearing at me. I placed my hand on his arm, grounding him. You don't have to carry it alone, I whispered. His eyes met mine, and for the first time there was no wall, only raw, unguarded need. I don't know how to let someone in, he admitted. But if I could, it would be you. And that was the moment I realized. No matter how impossible, no matter how terrifying, we were already bound together. By fate, by choice, by something neither of us could name but both of us felt. The snow still fell, endless and merciless. But inside that small mountain hospital, something else began to grow. Fragile, trembling, yet unstoppable. And even as fear clung to me, a whisper of hope echoed louder. A child. Ours. The doorway, his hands moving with precision, his face hard with focus. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. The man who carried life and death in his hands daily, who carried my secret in silence, who carried me. When it was over, when the patient was stabilized, Daniel stumbled into the hallway, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion. His eyes, usually guarded, were stripped bare like the storm had finally seeped inside him. I couldn't stop myself. Despite the pain in my ribs, I pushed away from the wall and went to him. I touched his arm, grounding him. You don't have to carry it alone, I whispered. His eyes lifted to mine, and for the first time there was no mask. No doctor, no savior, just Daniel. Fragile. Human. I don't know how to let someone in, he admitted, his voice breaking in a way I'd never heard before. But if I could, it would be you. Something inside me cracked open at those words. All the anger, all the confusion, all the impossible pieces of this strange truth blurred into something else, something terrifying and beautiful. The storm outside pounded harder, rattling the windows, but inside that hallway, the air felt still, alive. The days that followed stitched us together in ways neither of us spoke aloud. He checked my vitals, but his hands lingered longer than necessary. I pushed food around my tray until he raised an eyebrow, and I ate just to see him relax. At night, when the wind howled, he stayed, sometimes in silence, sometimes telling me stories that painted his loneliness in colors I could almost touch. Every glance between us grew heavier. Every pause stretched until the air itself seemed to vibrate with what we didn't dare confess. And still, there was the truth pulsing between us, the life growing inside me. I pressed my palm against my abdomen often, not from instinct but from disbelief, searching for something, anything. The weight of it terrified me, but the idea of it rooted deep, like a seed refusing to die. One evening, the storm knocked out the power. The hospital plunged into darkness, then flickered back to life with the hum of backup generators. The halls glowed in dim emergency lights, painting everything in shadow. I sat awake, the silence pressing down, until Daniel entered my room. His hair was damp, his coat streaked with melted snow. He looked like a man who had walked through fire and hadn't decided yet if he wanted to survive. "You should be asleep," he said softly. "So should you," I answered, voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, as though pulled by a force greater than the storm, he sat on the edge of my bed. The closeness was unbearable. His knee brushed mine through the thin hospital blanket, and heat shot through me. "Do you hate me?" he asked suddenly, his voice low and raw. I froze. "What?" "For not telling you sooner. For pulling you into something you never asked for. For making you a part of this." His hands clenched, knuckles white. "Because I've been waiting every day for you to look at me like I'm a monster." I swallowed hard, my chest aching, not from broken ribs this time, but from the sharp, suffocating truth. "I should hate you," I said. "But I don't." His head snapped up, eyes wide, vulnerable in a way that tore me apart. "Then what do you feel?" he whispered. I searched for words, but all I could do was reach for his hand. His skin was warm, calloused, trembling. When our fingers laced together, the world tilted, and something settled deep inside me. "Alive," I breathed. "For the first time in years, I feel alive." Daniel exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for centuries. And in the silence that followed, in the dim hum of the generator, the storm outside disappeared. He leaned closer, his forehead brushing mine, and I closed my eyes. It wasn't a kiss. Not yet. But it was a promise. A beginning. The following week tested us both. The storm sealed us tighter into the mountains. Supplies dwindled to nearly nothing. Nurses worked double shifts, patients grew restless, and Daniel carried the weight of it all on his shoulders. I watched him burn himself thin, watched his steps grow heavier, his eyes darker, and I hated watching him fade under burdens no one should carry alone. One night, I found him in the staff lounge, slumped in a chair, his hands covering his face. The sight broke something in me. "You can't keep doing this," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. His eyes lifted, tired and hollow. "If I don't, who will?" "You're killing yourself," I whispered. "And I can't. I can't lose you." The words slipped out before I could stop them, raw and naked. His gaze softened instantly, and he stood, crossing the room until he was inches from me. "You won't lose me," he said firmly. Then his voice dropped, trembling. "Unless you decide to walk away." I shook my head, chest burning. "I can't walk away. Not from you. Not from this." The silence that followed was charged, alive. And then, finally, he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, like a dam breaking, like years of loneliness crashing into a single moment. His lips pressed against mine with fire and fear, and I clung to him like the world outside didn't exist. For the first time, the storm inside me quieted. But peace never lasts long in places built on secrets. A week later, as the snow began to thin and roads threatened to reopen, Whispers spread through the hospital. A nurse had overheard something she shouldn't have. The patient had seen Daniel leaving my room late at night. And suddenly, our fragile world cracked. People are asking questions. Daniel admitted one morning, his face pale. About you. About us. Fear coiled in my stomach. Not just for me. Not just for him. But for the tiny, impossible truth binding us together. What do we do? I asked. Daniel's eyes burned with something fierce. Something unshakable. We protect what's ours. No matter what. The storm had begun to pass. But the real battle was only just beginning. The snow was finally breaking. Roads were rumored to be opening again within a week, and with them, the quiet cage of the hospital would dissolve into the wide, merciless world. For days I had been waiting for that moment, longing for the claustrophobic walls to release me, but when the possibility became real, a new fear rooted deep inside me. Freedom meant exposure. Exposure meant questions. Questions meant answers we weren't ready to give. And the world outside these frozen mountains would not be gentle with us. Rumors spread like cracks in ice. The staff no longer looked at me the same way. Some eyes were filled with pity, others with suspicion. The whispers followed Daniel, more viciously resentment that he had shown me favoritism, that he guarded me with a protectiveness unbefitting a doctor. One night, I overheard two nurses speaking in hushed tones near the supply closet. Always in his room at odd hours. You think? It's not professional, that's all I know. If the board finds out, their voices dropped when they saw me, but the damage was done. When I told Daniel, his jaw tightened, but he didn't look surprised. I knew it was only a matter of time, he said grimly. So what do we do? I asked, my throat dry. His eyes met mine, blazing with a strange calm. We don't let them take away what's ours. The words burned through me. Ours. He said it like a vow. But reality pressed harder each day. Supplies were running low, and an evacuation convoy was rumored to be arriving soon. With it came the certainty of scrutiny, new doctors, administrators, and eyes we could not escape. I tried to bury myself in the quiet moments with him. The way his fingers brushed mine when he checked my pulse. The fleeting smiles when we shared coffee in the dim glow of the staff lounge. The silent conversations carried in glances across crowded hallways. But the weight of the secret growing inside me could not be ignored. My body was already betraying me, subtle changes that would soon become undeniable. And when they did, questions would demand answers neither of us could give without tearing our fragile world apart. One evening, as the sun bled red across the snow, Daniel came into my room carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. What's that? I asked. He set it down gently on the bed. Clothes. Supplies. Enough to get you through a few days if you need to leave quickly. My chest tightened. Leave? Alone? His eyes flickered with pain. If it comes to that. No, the word was sharp, cutting. I'm not leaving without you. He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the war raging behind his calm facade. Duty versus desire. Fear versus hope. You don't understand what they'll do, he whispered. If anyone finds out about us, about the child, they'll destroy everything. My license, my career. They'll call it unnatural, unethical. They'll make sure neither of us walks away whole. I reached for his hand, clutching it like a lifeline. Then let them. I don't care about their rules, Daniel. Care about us. About this. I pressed his hand against my abdomen, where life pulsed quietly, impossibly. About what we've created. His breath caught. His fingers trembled against me. And then, for the first time, he didn't pull away. The night we finally gave in, the storm outside had weakened into silence. The hospital slept in uneasy calm, but in his arms, I felt nothing but fire. His kiss was a promise, a plea, a desperate defiance of the world waiting outside. We clung to each other as if we could burn down fate itself, as if we could carve a place where only we existed. And for a few hours we did. But dawn always comes, and with it reality. The evacuation convoy arrived earlier than expected. Trucks rumbled up the mountain road, headlights cutting through the thinning mist. Staff rushed through the halls, preparing patients, gathering files, restoring order. Chaos surged, and in it we were forced apart. I watched Daniel move through the corridors like a ghost of himself, commanding, calm, untouchable. But I knew the truth beneath his mask. His glances sought me in every room. His steps lingered where I stood. And still the world pressed in. An administrator from the convoy, a sharp-eyed woman in a pristine coat, cornered me in the hallway. "You've been under Dr. Hale's care?" she asked. Her tone was polite, but her eyes were knives. "Yes," I answered carefully. Her gaze flicked over me, clinical, assessing. "You seem closer than most patients to their physician." The air froze in my lungs. Before I could respond, Daniel appeared, his presence filling the hallway with quiet authority. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice steady. The woman's lips curved in a thin smile. "Not yet." She walked away, but her shadow lingered long after. That night, Daniel came to me, his face pale, his shoulders heavy with unspoken dread. "They're watching us," he said, closer than ever. Fear curled in my chest, but I forced myself to meet his gaze. "Then we fight harder." He shook his head, anguish flickering across his face. "You don't understand. They don't care about love. They don't care about truth. All they see is a breach of ethics, a scandal. And once they decide, nothing we say will matter." "Then what do you want me to do?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "Pretend there's nothing between us? Pretend this child doesn't exist?" Silence. The weight of it crushed me more than words ever could. Finally, he whispered, "I want you safe, even if it means losing me." My heart shattered. "Don't you dare," I choked out. "Don't you dare sacrifice us." But in his eyes, I saw its calculation, the desperate love twisted into something dangerous. And for the first time, I feared not just the world outside, but the choices Daniel himself might make. The storm had ended. The roads were open. The mountain hospital no longer felt like a refuge but a battlefield. And soon, the secret we had guarded so fiercely would no longer be ours alone. "You can't keep doing this," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. His hands dropped slowly from his face, and when he looked at me, I saw it cracks spiderwebbing through the man I had thought unshakable. His eyes were hollow, rimmed red, the weight of sleepless nights and endless responsibility pulling him apart. "If I don't, who will?" His voice was hoarse, barely there. "Then let me." The words spilled out before I could stop them, but once they were free, there was no taking them back. Daniel blinked, as if I had spoken a language he had forgotten existed. "You can't even walk across the hall without wincing," he said, frustration laced with desperation. "You need rest, not weight that isn't yours." I took a step closer, ignoring the stabbing ache in my side. "I'm already carrying weight that isn't mine." My hand drifted instinctively to my abdomen, pressing against the fragile secret between us. He flinched, subtle, but enough to tell me the truth still haunted him. I softened my tone, reaching out until my fingers brushed the sleeve of his coat. "You don't have to do this alone anymore. Not the hospital. Not this. Not me." For a long moment he just stared at me, chest rising and falling like he was drowning. Then, with a shudder, he whispered, "I don't know how." "Then let me teach you." The silence stretched, taut and fragile. His hand lifted, hovering, before it finally settled over mine. His palm was warm, grounding, yet trembling with the weight of surrender. And for the first time, Daniel let go of his duty, not of his burdens, but of the walls he had built so high that even he had forgotten what lived behind them. The storm raged for another week. Each day bled into the next, the hospital a fragile island against nature's fury. Patients shifted from fear to frustration, and staff morale cracked under the strain. But through it all, Daniel and I became something I hadn't dared to imagine. A team. He leaned on men at much, never enough for others to notice, but in stolen moments when exhaustion threatened to consume him, he let me hold a fraction of his weight. I listened, I steadied him, and in return he steadied me. At night, When the wind screamed against the windows, we found each other in the silence. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we simply existed side by side, the hum of the generator filling the space words could not. And beneath it all, the truth of what bound us deepened. One evening, after a particularly brutal day when a child nearly lost to fever pulled through, Daniel found me sitting by the frosted window. The snow outside glowed faintly in the moonlight, and for once, the storm seemed to rest. He stood there quietly before sinking into the chair beside me. "Do you ever think about it?" he asked, voice low, careful. I didn't need to ask what it was. My hand drifted again to my abdomen. "Every second," I admitted. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. "I never wanted to put you through this. To make you stop." My voice was firm, sharper than I expected. "Don't make it sound like I was just collateral. I chose to be here. I chose to stay. But not for this," he whispered, almost broken. I turned to face him fully, my ribs aching with the movement. "Maybe not for this, but now that it's here, I'm not running." His eyes glistened, shadows and light warring inside them. Slowly, hesitantly, he reached out and placed his hand over mine, over the fragile life neither of us could fully name. The touch burned, seared, healed. "Then I won't run either," he said. And for the first time, I believed him. The storm broke the next morning. The snow thinned, sunlight cracking through the clouds, bathing the mountains in silver and gold. The hospital stirred with cautious hope, whispers of supply trucks and rescue teams breathing new life into weary halls. But for me, for us, the storm breaking meant something else. It meant the world would return. And with it questions, the choices, the truths we could no longer hide. Daniel stood beside me at the window, his reflection fractured in the glass. He didn't speak, but I could feel the tension in him, the dread of what came after survival. I slipped my hand into his. "We'll face it," I said softly. His grip tightened, fierce and trembling. Together. Outside, the snow fell one last time, soft and delicateless like an ending, more like a beginning. And in that quiet, I realized the dead of winter had given me not just survival, but life. A fragile, impossible life we would now have to protect, no matter the storm still waiting beyond the mountains. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.